happening, but you have to comment on it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to a late night surprise edition of the Left Hook Substack. And Omar Badar is a fellow dad who just put his kiddos to sleep. My kiddos are gremlins who never sleep, and they were just out partying like they always do. They'll be back in a few minutes. But Omar Badar is a Palestinian American commentator, an expert on Middle East policy, was my former colleague when we used to work together at Al Jazeera America's The Stream. And, I had Omar on because he's actually an authentic Palestinian American, and he's been speaking about the issue of Israel's occupation for decades now. And with the conversation that has dominated the newscape over the past 3 days, not about potential World War III with Iran, not about the fact that Republicans are passing one of the most odious bills, which represents the largest theft and wealth transfer in America. Oh, not the fact that, ISIS terrorizing Americans. Oh, not the fact that Israel continues the genocide. No. Kneecap and Bob Villain and the way they chanted and protested at Glastonbury. That, my friends, that has been the biggest news story in the BBC. And now what we found out earlier today on the Hollywood Reporter is Bob Villain, a rap group that no one knew about, has lost its visa. They were touring America, but the Trump department said, "Oh no, we can't tolerate this." But we can't tolerate Elon Musk doing Zig Heils and promoting Nazi conspiracies. And also, Bob Villain lost its UTA representation. And everyone who's brown or Muslim, especially Palestinian, or in some way, shape, or form supports the Palestinian right to freedom, is asked, do you condemn Bob Villain's statements? Do you condemn the chants globalize the Intifada? And yet, I ask, how come we're not talking about the actual genocide and actual Palestinians being killed? And how come there's a double standard? And then there's Kneecap, folks, the Irish rap group, which is not Palestinian or Muslim. And this all began because the BBC decided to bend the knee and censor Kneecap's performance in Glastonbury. So they censored Kneecap's performance. And what did they get instead? Bob Villain, who took the stage and said, free Palestine, and then did a chant, death to IDF, not death to Jews, not death to Israel, death to IDF. Whether or not you agree with the chant or not, that's what they said. And then the lead singer did a post with him having a gelato ice cream, and the next day doubling down and saying, I'm standing against injustice. So I think all of this is connected to, I don't know, Omar, the crackdown on pro-Palestinian activists, the detention of Mahmoud Khalil, Zoran Mamdani being absolutely smeared. And I think this is related to the cracking down on any dissent in what is increasingly a fascist America and a fascist regime in Israel. But the big question I have then with all of this is, what is the appropriate, safe way to protest a genocide? And I yield the floor to you, Omar.
Yeah, there isn't. You're exactly putting your finger on the problem, right? You're supposed to just politely say, hey, maybe this isn't great. Maybe it should be a little bit less bad. And then people can just ignore you and carry on doing what they're doing. But if you try to draw any attention to the unbelievable, colossal injustice that Israel is imposing on Palestinians in any meaningful or emotionally impactful way, then you're instantly demonized. That is the environment that we're living in. And just think, Wajahat, about how lunatic it is to say that artists who say things that you don't like get their visas revoked, but Benjamin Netanyahu, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for the act of extermination in Gaza, gets to not only come to the United States with a visa, but gets a hero's welcome in Congress, gets to walk into the steps of Capitol Hill, into the floor, and all you get is absolutely cheers from political leaders. It's a really upside down world. I never imagined that would be in a moment that is this Orwellian. It's as if 1984 is a documentary rather than a book of fiction in this environment that we're living in which up is down, right is wrong, war is peace, and genocide is applaudable, and protesting genocide is something that we should all condemn. It's just entirely insane.
I mean, look, with the chant, I have to ask you this. I've never heard you say death to the IDF. You're a Palestinian American. You have family in Palestine that has suffered occupation. But Bob, what's the name? Bob Villain, who I'd never heard of before, right?
Thank
Punk rock band, right? Sex Pistols, Rage Against the Machine. My whole deal on this is, who cares? It's a punk rock band that I'd never heard of that chanted at Glastonbury. All right, you can condemn it, not like it. You don't have to say it that way. But why is this getting this much coverage? And yet, not a single iota of coverage on Israeli leaders. Go down the list: Smotrich, Ben Gvir, Herzog, literally the security cabinet, prime minister, who have
Yeah.
openly said genocidal stuff, increasingly said genocidal stuff, and no one's focusing on that, but we're focusing on Bob Villain, the double standards that are at play, the
Yeah.
asymmetry, which is so representative of the entire conflict. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, look, I mean, just it's funny. Of the list of Israeli government leaders, there's Ben Gvir, who is convicted in an Israeli court of racism and anti-Arab incitement and terrorism in Israel. He's so extreme that even within the apartheid regime of Israel, he's been condemned by by their courts.
But
And
tell him who Ben Gvir is for those who don't know. What's
yeah,
his current role?
he's in charge of national security for Israel, particularly overseeing the West Bank. And the West Bank, of course, is illegally occupied Palestinian territory. Israel doesn't belong there. They're obligated under international law to leave the West Bank. Their occupation is illegal. And in spite of that, Israel has carried on decade after decade of illegal occupation in which they're not just staying there and, just for the sake of staying, they're building Israeli settlements. They're expanding colonies throughout the West Bank to make sure that the Palestinians can never basically have a state on that land. That is the policy. And Ben Gvir is now in charge of running security, national security for Israel. And he's just openly, brazenly racist and anti Palestinian in all of his rhetoric and his actions, carries out a gun around him anywhere that he goes. He gets to come to the United States despite being condemned by an Israeli court for anti Palestinian incitement and terrorism. And yet, if you're a band saying something against Israel. And again, look, like maybe saying death to the IDF is inflammatory, but can you imagine anybody who says death to ISIS or death to, for that matter, even within the context of this particular configuration since 2023, if anybody had said death to Hamas, that would not be disqualifying for them to come to the US. And yet, the Israeli military, which, from my perspective, is the single largest terrorist organization in the entire Middle East, its record of deliberate attacks on civilians is unmatched by anybody else in that region. They are literally sniping toddlers in the head. As we've seen testimonies from doctors who go and visit, including American Jewish doctors who go and visit and come back and say they've never seen so many wounds to the heads of children from a single sniper bullets. They are literally raping detainees in Israeli detention. And when video emerges of that and the Israeli police try to prosecute the Israeli soldiers who are guilty of this, there are riots throughout Israeli society and Israeli
Yep.
politicians come to the defense of them. This is a military that is literally accused by every major human rights organization in the world of wiping out entire families. They are accused of genocide by so many genocide experts, and they're singing about genocide. There is endless footage of members of the Israeli military who are chanting about the Amalek and may your village burn and all this rhetoric about wiping Palestinians off the face of the earth. And yet, if you say something about the IDF that somebody does not like, that somehow becomes disqualifying and equated to anti Semitism and everything else. This weaponization of anti Semitism, this deliberate conflation between opposition to the war crimes of this terrorist organization and anti Semitism, I cannot think of anything worse. Not just wajahat for the people who are being smeared by this false charge of anti Semitism, but frankly, for the American Jewish community and for the Jewish community across the world, because when you water that charge down, when it doesn't mean anything anymore because you're leveling it at random advocates of human rights, then real anti Semites have more of an environment in which they can flourish and act, and people pay less attention to it because that charge has been watered down so much.
Well, I mean, we see, unfortunately, the real life example of both anti Semitism and anti Arab, anti Palestinian Islamophobia rise in the past year and a half. The violence against Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, and Jews, right? Exploited oftentimes, not exclusively, by white supremacists, people like Nick Fuentes and Tommy Robinson and others, right? And speaking about the normalization of actual white supremacists and anti Semites, you see the embrace of Elon Musk, a man who did two Zig Heils, a man who has literally platformed Nazis, a man who has openly promoted the anti-Semitic George Soros conspiracy. And then when asked about it, he says, well, that's like your opinion, man. Or like Donald Trump, who and Republicans who promoted the anti-Semitic replacement theory that has radicalized terrorists to commit violence. Now, the double standard here, and I think it's important to call this out, is that if ADL cared truly about anti-Semitism, I think they would condemn, oh, I don't know, Elon Musk with the double Zig Heils. But what did they do? Do you remember?
Yeah,
Uh,
they used to be against Elon Musk, right? That's the history that's really important to remember. When Elon Musk first took over Twitter, ADL was just raging about how he's allowing all this anti-Semitism on the platform and the accounts that he has personally amplified. And then what does Elon Musk do? He goes and visits Israel and pals around with Netanyahu, and then suddenly the ADL doesn't have a problem with Elon Musk anymore. That really gives the game away. It was never about anti-Semitism in the first place. The ADL is the Apartheid Defense League. If you are a supporter of the Israeli government and its horrific policies, the ADL is good with you. If you're a critic of those policies, then the ADL is against you and more than happy to weaponize the charge of anti Semitism to come after you. It's just
and, and,
never been more blatant.
I mean, and I just want to show people the double standards because, especially if you're Palestinian, and I would say if you're Muslimi, because I'm the son of Pakistani immigrants. It doesn't matter. What I always tell people, Islamophobia is not just about Muslims. Anyone who looks Muslimi, a Muslim is a Palestinian, is an Arab, is ISIS, is Al Qaeda, is Hamas, is Hezbollah. If you don't believe me, look what they did against Zoran Mamdani. Look what they did against Mehdi Hassan. Look what they did against Barack Obama, who's not even a Muslim. Do you see, folks? Do you see? And look what they're doing against Mamdani right now, equating him with the 9/11 terror attacks. That's what Charlie Kirk did, even though he is a son of African and South Asian immigrants. It doesn't matter, right? And so, if indeed they were caring about anti-Semitism, which, by the way, is real and is a problem, right? What they should do is, oh, I don't know, go after Elon Musk or Donald Trump for dining with Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist. Nothing. No Republican gets asked, do you condemn Donald Trump for dining with a Nazi lover, Nick Fuentes? Do you condemn Elon Musk for doing Zig Heils? Do you condemn, Elise Stefanik for promoting the replacement theory? They never get asked that, right? But instead, we get asked, do you condemn some random chat done by Bob, a villain that you've never met, right? The endless condemnathon, which always keeps moving the goalpost forward. And
Yeah.
to me, what it seems like, it's less about anti-Semitism, unfortunately, and it's more like we will use our power to crush anyone who criticizes Israel and defends Palestinians.
And you know, Wajahat, I think there's one more thing here that's really important. You expect the right to be bigoted and racist in this environment, and you expect them to exploit any opportunity to score political points. So when they come after Mamdani with all kinds of racist invective, that's somewhat expected. What has been just colossally disappointing and revealing in a way is the silence of Democrats, the reluctance
Oh,
to
yeah.
endorse him, and in some cases with Senator Gillibrand, just actually piling on with anti-Muslim bigotry towards Mamdani. Those are the same people who told you that it doesn't matter whether you like the policies of Biden, whether you like the policies of Harris, you have to vote blue because that's all that matters. And yet here we are with Mamdani winning the Democratic Party nomination. And suddenly they've discovered that they don't have to just vote blue no matter who. For them, we have to put up with support for genocide in Gaza, and we should still play the party line because that's all that matters. And for them, because he's a fundamentally decent human being who's looking for real, equitable foreign policy and domestic policy that might rub some apologists for apartheid and genocide the wrong way, they are running in the other direction and distancing themselves. It's just been, I have lived through the post 9/11 environment here in the US. I'm sure we have endless stories from that time.
Endless.
I, and to have reached this point and to think that they're behaving even worse than they did in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 is something I just did not really see coming in this moment. It's been
Yeah,
utterly
yeah.
horrifying.
I've been talking to a lot of Muslimi folks the past 2 weeks, and the attack on Zoran Mamdani and the pylon, which sadly, for those who watch the Left Hook and read my tweets and posts, I've been predicting for 2.5 weeks, even before the election. I said, watch the Islamophobia and smearing get worse. They would rather figuratively burn New York City down than let this guy become the mayor. This, and by they I mean the establishment. Those who, it's the same. It's corporate money, the oligarchy, apex money, right? And the smearing that even the Democrats will do. And I also said this, Omar, is that I had more faith in Trump pulling out America from Israeli support and also potentially not going into war on Iran, not based on the liberals or Democrats, but based on the America First part of the MAGA wing. People like, and I'm going to feel like I'm going to throw up in my mouth, people like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others, right? I had zero faith in the Democrats. I knew the Democrats would pile on, but even seeing it in real time, and especially the way they did it over this weekend by literally not even doing their work. It's like someone from APAC gave him talking points when they went on Sunday News, and instead of talking about this beautiful bill from hell, which has overwhelmingly negative support. Like you can run the tables on Republicans for this bill that they're about to pass. None of them talked about the bill. They instead talked about Zoran Mamdani, and not only that, they lied about it and said, "Oh, he has to really condemn the language of globalize the Intifada," which he has never used. It's the sloppy, disgusting manner
Yeah,
in which they're smearing him, right? In addition to the fact that they went for Cuomo over Mamdani. All of this, in addition to the fact there was mouse farts when Mahmoud Khalil and Rameza Osterk were detained, and then it took
yeah,
Chris Van Hollen to go to El Salvador, and then when Chris Van Hollen went to El Salvador and got proof of life of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and the polls changed, then you remember all those
yeah,
Democrats went and visited Rameza Osterk and Mahmoud Khalil, right? That type of cowardice, that type of like chickenry, the fact that not enough groups have come out and actually supported Zoran Mamdani. All of this, folks who are watching, if you're not Muslim or Palestinian or Arab, none of this is lost on any of us, right? It's not
yeah,
just us, because a lot of people, Umar, I'm sure you get this a lot. It's because of you Muslims and Arabs, because Kamala Harris lost. Are you all happy? And I always want to tell people a majority of Muslims and Arabs, despite the genocide, despite the fact the Democratic Party said, F you, shut your mouth, we still voted for Kamala Harris, the lesser of two
yeah,
evils. But go back to the DNC and remind people what this Democratic Party did to those people who were literally Democrats who were
yeah,
saying, please, 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 at the very least, the bar is so low it's in hell. Just invite a Palestinian
yeah.
speaker.
That was literally it, right? We got to the point to where Palestinians just wanted to make the case for the lesser of two evils in spite of the horror. And they wanted a token gesture from the Democratic Party. Literally, they
That was
asked
it.
for a token gesture. And that was too much for the Democrats. They're not, nope, screw you. We are all the way pro genocide, and you have no voice in this party. And then to have the gall to have done everything in your power when everybody was screaming that you are throwing the election away by supporting this genocide. The opinion polls showed unbelievable opposition to this genocide and a demand that America shift its policy that we not provide this blank check for Israel. For the party leadership to look at these polls and insist on going down the wrong track and then blame the voters for it is just so completely idiotic. The voters are never at fault. It is always the candidates whose job it is to win the support of the voters. And so if you're not able to put together a compelling message, I mean, I don't know, the lack of ability to take responsibility for your actions, the way that you evade responsibility by blaming the voters instead, is itself an act of cowardice and an inability to look in the mirror. And it is taking exactly what you're describing. If they were paying any attention, the message is loud and clear. The Democratic Party base has shifted. Young people in this country have shifted. We are not the party of old. This is not the party that, you know, is looking for APAC talking points. This is not the stuff that wins you elections anymore. And Mamdani proved it. You saw it in that, when they went around asking all the mayoral candidates what their first foreign visit would be.
Oh wow.
More than
Yeah,
half
yeah.
of them, it's all like taking turns competing over who's more pro Israel. There is an SNL skit that really borders on this. It's hardly a parody in which everybody's just competing over who's more pro Israel than the other. And it cut to Mamdani and he said, I'm not talking about Israel. I'm going to stay in New York and I'm going to take care of New York issues. And I'm going to work with the Jewish community in New York and address the concerns of the Jewish community in New York. And frankly, young Jewish New Yorkers sympathize with this message. And that's why he even got, higher support among the Jewish community in a city than many people expected. I don't know what it's going to take for the political class to wake up and understand that the jig is up, that nobody wants their bullshit talking points anymore, and it's time to meet the voters where they are, which is being progressive domestically and on foreign policy, and to stop engaging in this kind of hateful rhetoric and kowtowing to whatever Israel wants. That's not what Americans want anymore.
It's so painful that that clip, which is just like literally a comedy sketch, where, as Omar said, they went down the row and they asked these mayoral candidates, "What's the first trip you'll take?" It was like this litmus test, and the first person says Israel, the second person says the Holy Land, the third person says my fourth trip to Israel. I'm not making this up, folks.
Yep.
And then they finally get to Zoran. He goes, "I'm going to stay in New York." And then there's this clip that's gone viral, and I want to throw up because like this is where we are right now. That Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene were talking about that. He played the clip and he says Zoran gave the right answer. This is where we are. that the Democratic leadership has me agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson on this issue. I'm so like angry at them for the fact that I am agreeing with Tucker Carlson of all people, right? Throwing Zoran under the bus, throwing the pro-Palestinian activists under the bus, throwing Columbia University under the bus. And what are they? What did it give them? Does MAGA love them? Does MAGA think they're tough on crime? Does MAGA embrace them, Omar? Has it helped the Democratic Party in any way? Did it help Gavin Newsom by platforming Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon? Look what the ISIS terrorized in California. Did it help any of these individuals whatsoever to win over the base that thinks they're pedophiles? You tell me.
Yeah. All it has done for them, right, is earned them the approval of APAC and billionaire donors, the same donors who gave Kamala Harris a ton of money that ended up losing her the election anyway. Money is important. To win elections, you do need money. But if your message is so counter to the basic decency and fundamental, just basic wishes of what Americans actually want and are looking for in a candidate, it's not the be all end all. And when you constantly prioritize what donors want over what voters want at a time in which we have so much more awareness, that is a losing strategy. I I think that the part of the problem, Wajahat, is the consultant class in
Oh yeah.
DC that keeps giving the wrong advice over and over to candidate to stick to the same talking points and to push away anybody who's brown or Arab or Muslim or whatever. Like, it's just this strategy. They're still stuck in a mindset that has been over for more than 20 years. And somebody needs to shake them out of it. And I don't know how many more elections they're going to lose. And you'd think that losing an election would be the wake up call, but their ability to lose an election and then still listen to the same consultants running a centrist, vapid corporate campaign, distancing yourself from the left, and then when you lose, you say it's the left's fault. Well, how about you run a progressive campaign, and then when you lose, by all means, blame the left, but at least give it a try. And Mamdani does give it a try, and then he wins. And these idiots, instead of embracing that as the way of the future, end up wanting to step back from it. I don't know what to say.
And also they can't escape Palestine anymore. And I think Israel has radicalized people in a year and a half. That's something I was talking to someone, I've only seen it once before in my life. It was with gay marriage. Within a few years, I saw such a radical cultural shift, which then translated to a political shift. And the second time I've seen it is the last year and a half, where, you and I used to speak and, what we used to say on television or, our tweets, people are like, oh, whatever, it's so left. But now, common. Young people around the world, look at Glastonbury. Israel has lost the culture war. Israel has lost the youth. Israel has lost the narrative. Israel has lost the majority. According to the Gallup poll in America, a majority of Americans have an unfavorable rating of Israel, which I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. And it's because in a year and a half, a genocide has been streamed to the world on their phones. And this young generation, regardless of ethnicity or national origin or religion, is like, why the hell should I support Israel? Israel currently it has become like apartheid South Africa. It's been completely toxic. It's the only other recent analogy that I can give. And an entire young generation says, why are my taxpayer dollars going to support a genocide and occupation? And this whole America First movement of MAGA, I don't know if you've heard these MAGA folks, right? MAGA, 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 MAGA talking point. As soon as it gets to Israel, Palestine, they sound like us. You're like, what just happened? What?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, this is just horrible, man. They're killing babies, and this is the IDF is occupying. This is wrong, and they know all these talking points. I'm like, what? And so the fact that the Democratic Party, even as their own base told them, even as the YouGov poll, I think you were referring to the YouGov poll that said the number one reason why millions of Democrats, and not the only reason, folks, the number one reason why Democrats, not just Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, number one reason why Democrats stayed home was because of Gaza. Now, Gaza would not have given her the election, but she still would have lost by even less. And she barely lost, right? But I don't think it would have radicalized so many voters against the DNC, right?
Yeah.
Meaning, even had she taken a bit of a stance on different from Biden on Gaza, or literally the lowest bar on earth, brought a Palestinian speaker to speak alongside the mother of the Israeli prisoner who unfortunately was killed, Rose Goldberg Poland, who gave a beautiful speech that
Yeah.
I saw Palestinian activists say this was wonderful. Have a Palestinian and the Jewish mom hold their hands, say the same speech. Omer, the lowest bar, the bar is in hell.
Yeah.
You still would have lost the election, but you would have not lost so many people. And then you see, like you said, Zoran Mamdani won this amazing campaign with the help of Jewish voters, right? Brad Lander and black voters, and has galvanized so many people. And still they're like, Let's burn down our party.
Yeah.
Let's literally say F you to the base for the billionaires and for APAC. And I'm at that point now, Omar. And maybe this is because I'm old like you, maybe because I've seen this for 24 years, maybe because like you, I've been asked to condemn violent acts done by people I've never met before. And I realize no matter how much I condemn, it's never enough. And meanwhile, right wingers and Nazis and white supremacists and friggin' Jewish supremacists are never asked to condemn anything. And then seeing what's happening to this guy Mamdani, something inside
Yeah.
me, like Omar, I'm just like figuratively burn this party to the ground.
Yeah.
Like, if this is a Democrat establishment, I want this party not burned to the ground, but culled. It should be culled. Like like how you see like rotten fruit, and you just
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But where are you on
Yeah.
this?
Look, I mean, I sat out the last election. Of course, it's easy for me to have done that. In Virginia, it seemed safe was going to go blue. I could not bring myself to turn out to the voting polls because of how disgusting the choices that we were offered. By the way, not out of any illusion, like I understood Trump was worse in every way. Like if even if they're equal on this one issue, and I don't think they're even equal. I think Trump, obviously, with
It's
the
far
crap
worse.
he's doing right now, is worse. On every other issue, right? Even if you were able to set Gaza to the side to say both Trump and Harris are going to be equally awful, there is the way that Trump is robbing the country as blatantly as we've ever seen a president
Yeah,
do.
I
This is
agree.
not, again, this is not to defend the Democratic Party establishment. This is not to suggest that the system before Trump was somehow pure or whatever. There's so much corruption, and lobbyists had too much power. Special interests run this country. That is a fact. But to have a president come along and to basically make bribery borderline legal, to say, I'm going to produce this meme coin. Like the way corruption works in America is you support a political candidate by helping them get elected. That's what you're donating towards is their campaign. In exchange, then the politician will have their policies tailored towards what the donors wanted. In the case of Trump, it's not even supporting his campaign. It's putting money directly in his personal pocket. This meme coin crap is just money that goes to Donald Trump himself.
Yeah.
And then he turns around and says, the top donors to this meme coin can have a special dinner with me. And they host it at a golf course and whatever. We've never seen corruption this bad. This man
Nope.
has no interest in even pretending to care about the public good or public interest. He's just so blatantly corrupt. Everything he does, including the stupid trade wars he's having with other countries, the stipulations for people to get out of, having tariffs increased on them, is to enact policies that support Trump's friends. And back when he was friends with Elon before they had their falling out, countries were approving Starlink from Elon's company, giving them access in their countries as a way to try to get the tariffs removed. And that's what was working. This is corruption like we've never seen before. And it's a fucking horror show. And it's unbelievable that the Democrats have lowered the bar so much that people could not turn out to the polls to support them, even when this was the alternative. That's ultimately the difference in the genocide when we talk about it. When American policy in support of genocide by both candidates is there, it's going to diminish progressive turnout substantially more than it's going to depress it on the right because we know the right doesn't care as much. And yet, just from that America First perspective, people who don't really care about Palestinians that much on the right are saying, why are we giving this money to this foreign
Yep.
government to do this? Why are our politicians bending over backwards to just praise Israel relentlessly and ignoring the basic needs of Americans? That's the perspective without even any regard for Palestinian life. It's just, we've reached a point at this point where it really is across the spectrum, where the political establishment in both parties is out of touch with where the country is. And I think you put your finger on it when you mentioned people watching a live stream genocide on their phones, because that's the real divide. Younger Americans who do get access to real information through their phones and social media are watching the horrors unfolding in Gaza and are being radicalized by it. Whereas the older generation, they're still consuming legacy corporate media that whitewashes everything. And that's why the older generation still is entrenched. And that's why, Joe Biden watches, MSNBC's Morning Joe every day. And that's kind of, yes, if that's what you're watching, you're going to be out of touch with the party because that does not represent where the party is. And that's the challenge is I don't want to say like whether we give up or not. I don't think we have the option to give up on the Democratic Party in
No.
light of what Donald Trump is and what he
Yeah.
represents, and the fact that we're stuck in this awful position of a two-party system. We have every right to be infuriated by the Democrats, but at the end of the day, come election day, you need to get rid of the most corrupt, most vile administration in certainly my memory. That becomes a necessity. And I'm hopeful about the fact that in the long term, I think things are going to shift in a better direction. Public opinion shows it, the trends show it. More people who take the route that Mamdani took are going to do better and better. That's their trajectory. The problem right now is that there is an urgency. We can't wait for this to naturally take its course over many years before the Democratic Party becomes even more progressive the way it's supposed to. There's an urgency because Israel sees a shrinking window of opportunity. They know the future does not look very bright for them. And so they are trying to get rid of Palestinians in as quick a turnaround as possible because they know they have Trump for the next few years and they feel an urgency to do as much damage as possible while they know they have that blank check from Trump. And that's kind of where my deep frustration comes. Even though I'm hopeful about the distant future, I am absolutely livid at the current moment and the fact that I'm worried about what a few more years of Trump and Israel's blank check is going to mean for Palestinian existence.
I think it's clear it's genocide. And it's not just my words, it's the words of the Israeli leaders. It's the policy and it's the actions that have taken place over the past year and a half. I mean, look at Gaza, it's destroyed. The story that came out on Haaretz 3 days ago that the IDF soldiers were commanded to shoot at unarmed Palestinian civilians who were gathered at an aid distribution site. I mean, the cruelty, the callousness, the fact that I just said that out loud and there's still people who are supporting that, that's to me is genocidal sociopathic behavior. And I think we have to call it out as such, right? And the fact that our taxpayer dollars are now supporting this to the point where I was on Piers Morgan earlier today. I didn't even have to do as much. I was there for an hour. Piers did most of my work for me. And then the insane genocidal pro-Israel guest pretty much made my case. It was the least I ever spoke, Omar. I just kept quiet. And I'm like, you literally made my case for me. It's indefensible. And I think that's what makes it more infuriating that this is now indefensible, right? You've lost the youth. You've lost people all around the world. You've lost the base. A majority of Americans, first time in my lifetime, are against this. The Gallup poll shows it. Your own voters show it. The water is warm. You could dip your toes in. You don't have to dip 10 toes in. You could dip 7 toes in. And still, after losing an election and looking at the data, Hakeem Jeffries, Senator Schumer, Kristen Gillibrand, and all the others said, should we use this privileged space on Sunday talk shows to talk about Trump being corrupt, helping the oligarchy, literally causing death with his bill? No, no. We must destroy Mamdani.
Yeah.
And why? For APAC. It is just remarkable to me. And, I want to bring things back full circle because we are witnessing a genocide and we are witnessing a final solution being carried out in Gaza, right? Where literally the Israeli cabinet voted for Israel to occupy Gaza and then to move or relocate Palestinians to the south, which
Mhm.
means ethnic cleansing, which means genocide, right? And so I ask you, what is the best way to protest it? Mahmoud Khalil, pro-Palestinian activist, zero crimes, detained. Rumeza Oster, grad student, wrote an op-ed, detained. Columbia University, gutted. Melissa Barrera, the lead actress of Scream, last year shared a post by an Israeli historian who called it a genocide. Spyglass kicked her out of the Scream franchise. You and me ain't Melissa Barrera, man,
Yeah.
right? You see Mamdani. They would rather kneecap Mamdani and give it to Cuomo than have Mamdani win. So for people who are watching right now, say, what's the best way, right? Bob Villan. We're not going to say that's the IDF, but now he can't come to the U. They can't come to the U.S.
Yeah.
What is the best, most acceptable way for
Yeah.
someone who votes Democrat to protest a genocide without being crushed, Omar?
Yeah. This is, I mean, there are no guarantees, right? You could very well, if you decide to take a moral stance in a moment like this, there might be consequences, might be professional consequences, legal consequences. Anything is possible. But for me, it's not even a question that the least one can do is to use their voice to speak up against this. And that is a line I'm not willing to go below. Yes, it would be safer if I didn't protest, but I'm not going to keep my mouth shut about this because this is about not just, frankly, it is about Palestinians in Palestine, first and foremost, who are suffering the brunt of this, but this is also about what kind of country you want here in the United States, of whether you're allowed to criticize a foreign government or not. And moving in a direction, I don't want my kids to grow up in a country where they're afraid to speak their mind. That is the entire appeal of being in America. That is why people from all over the world want to come here. The idea of the First Amendment and the right to say whatever you want is so core to what makes this country special. And I'm not prepared to give that away, no matter what. And so I think this is a moment where we need collective courage. We need everybody to see that even though there have been negative consequences for people who are speaking up, to say that we are going to keep pushing and speaking louder and louder in every way possible to make clear that this shifting discourse, what we should be doing is isolating people who are not speaking out. We are living again in an Orwellian moment in which to support a genocide is mainstream and acceptable, and you can have your organizations get major funding and you get platformed in every outlet, and to oppose the mass slaughter of and starvation of children that we're witnessing day in and day out is what is politically unacceptable and confining and has repercussions. The only way to break out of that is to insist on speaking out. We have the truth on our side. We have justice on our side. We have fundamental decency and common sense on our side. And if we insist on fighting through this and continuing to speak up no matter what, I have no doubt that the tables will turn. And soon enough, only through collective courage, if we don't let each other down and we instead insist on standing united and speaking out, that we're going to make it so that apologists for genocide are the ones who have to hide and worry about their professional futures.
Amen. And what I will tell people is when they say, well, why should I care about this? I always try to remind folks is that first and foremost, Republicans attacked the transgender community, the most marginalized. And people said, we don't like the transgender. Yeah, let's go along with that in anti-CRT and DEI. And then they moved out to the undocumented. They're like, yeah, the undocumented. Why can't they come here the right way? And then they went after pro-Palestinian activists. They're like, yeah, I don't like some of these chants. Then they went after Columbia University, then law firms, then judges, right? Then now legal immigrants. Now they want to strip citizenship. Now they're unleashing terror against an entire city. Los Angeles, Donald Trump has promised to go after other blue cities, right? He's going after white Christian Republicans who don't support him. I'll give you Senator Tom Tillis. I give you Mike Pence running for his life on January 6th. Fascists come for everyone. They're using anti-Semitism as a cudgel to go against pro-Palestinian activists, but what they really want to do is to crush dissent and go after universities and academics, anyone who has the courage to speak out against U.S. foreign policy or Christian nationalism or the MAGA agenda. It's all connected, folks. They always go after the lowest hanging fruit. And in this particular case, the lowest hanging fruit were the undocumented, transgender communities, and pro-Palestinian activists. And voila, folks, do you see what happened? They came after everyone within 6 months. They came after everyone. So you need to support justice for Palestinians because you cannot support justice for Palestinians and then stay silent for justice for Ukrainians or justice for the Rohingya or justice for the Sudanese or justice for the Kashmiris or justice for the LGBTQ or justice for Muslims or justice for undocumented because fascists are coming after all of us. And I agree with you, Omar. You and I are fathers and we're raising our kids in the United States of America. In this country, we have a chance, our children have a chance to be the co-protagonists of the narrative. And as we have seen, they literally want to erase us from the story.
Mhm.
And if they can't erase us from the story, they will kidnap us and deport us all. And so that's why I think people should care, in addition to the fact that what we're seeing in real life, folks, is a genocide. What I've told people is you can and should be against Hamas's terrorist attacks on October 7th. I think Israel had a right to respond proportionally to that. But this has gone on for a year and a half. There's no proportionality. This is genocide. These are war crimes. And we haven't even talked about the occupation. We haven't even talked about the West Bank. We haven't even talked about the expansion of settlements. We haven't even talked about the terrorism of the settlers, folks. And this is being done with U.S. dollars and U.S. weapons. So you figure out, folks, what's the most appropriate way to condemn a genocide. But I hope, folks, at the very least, you stand up and do it, whether through it's a post, it's at home, or your voice. Omar Badar, I give you the final word and tell people also how to shamelessly promote yourself and tell people how they can support you.
Yeah, I'm on every social media imaginable. So you can find me on Instagram, I still insist on calling it Twitter. I will not call it X. YouTube channel. If you just search my name, Omar Badar, you'll be able to find me wherever you search for me. And just in closing, right, if people are going to look at the situation in Palestine, the there is a desperate attempt to paint October 7th as the only day that's relevant. And the truth is, Palestinians were being slaughtered in huge numbers before October 7th and after October 7th. It's an arbitrary day in which we have this hyper focus on as a deliberate propaganda campaign. And everything that Israel accused Palestinians of is something that Israel has done. Every accusation is a confession. People don't know that it's Israel that's using Palestinians as human shields in confrontation. It is Israel that is weaponizing rape against Palestinians in detention. It is Israel that's weaponizing hunger against Palestinians, systematically killing children. All these monstrous things that we associate exclusively with ISIS or whatever, like, it's always the most horrible imaginable cult that you can think of, is literally policy for the Israeli military. And the fact that the United States is using our taxpayers, that our government is taking our hard earned money to give it to the most extreme and fanatical group in the entire Middle East in order to carry out unspeakable crimes, is something that should shock the conscience and really infuriate every American. And I think we all have a moral duty and a strategic common sense responsibility towards our own country to say that not another penny to this genocidal regime until that genocide comes to an end. That is an absolute necessity.
And let's hope, from, as they say, from your lips to Democratic leaders' ears. Thank you, Omar. It's late, but you joined me. My babies are here, wide awake because they're just freaks. Your babies are tamed and civilized, and so they sleep. For those who joined us late, don't worry. I'm going to have this up in an hour. I strongly recommend you go back and listen to Omar. He was dropping bars and gems. There'll be a transcript as well. This is for the left hook. I've kept everything for free without paywalls. You pay what you can. If you can pay, please do, because I got like 800 kids I have to feed. But I'm a fool, and I believe that people should be informed during a fascist regime. And someone used to say that democracy dies in darkness, and the owner of that paper just threw himself a $50 million wedding in Venice. So that's where we're at, folks. So stay informed, be kind, be empathetic, and please, oh please, don't be a fascist. And at the very least, be against a genocide. Omar, thank you so much, sir.
Absolutely great being with you, Waj. We'll see
Take
you.
care, man.
All right.